just cannot get your head to say, stop. I just want a night's rest. I don't want to think about it for 4 hours. That's all I want. Just do not think about it for 4 hours. I want the video to stop. And it just keeps on playing and playing and playing. And the nightmares keep on coming and coming and coming. I thought I was mad. I thought I was seriously going mad.
All the depression, all the emotional grief and sadness, we kept covering that up and up over and over again until you could go no further. Lives were on the line here and we were literally living on the edge, day in and day out.
Within probably about a month of being stationed in South Armagh, you begin to be exposed to various incidents which are totally alien to you. You have no idea how to deal with them. Slowly but surely, your personality changes.
You smell something or you see a building or a car pass, you say, oh fuck, I remember that. And you go into a daze, you go into, it's like a movie in your head. And it's never ending. And there's just no help there. There's no help for people like me.
For some of those closest to the horror of violence, the memories won't go away. Trauma is relived over and over again.
5 times they tried to murder me. 5 times in 2 years. I mean, I have a 33% disability, PTSD, and that's a big disability. That's a third of your health. But the worst part for me has been the paranoia, because you lose trust in people, and then you start to lose contact with people, and you go into a wee shell on your own, and you don't want to go out, and you don't want to answer the phone, and when it gets really bad, it's like going into like a cocoon.
You can watch Private Ryan, you can watch the horror unfold on TV, but to actually be there and the sight, the smell, the sound, the object terror, and the carnage is something that you can never prepare yourself for.
Our work was involved with murders day in, day out. Daily, weekly, monthly, we never got any rest from it. So it was all in your head all the time about murders, murders, murders.
They knew me personally, and I knew all them, and it ended up, that they're trying to kill you. It doesn't become then they're trying to kill me because I'm a policeman. It's me specifically. They want me specifically. And they have people around the town watching for me, watching for my car, and trying to tie me down to a time and a place where they can set up the hit.
David was injured 17 times in his 14-year police career. Beaten, shot at, blown up. He believes his multiple sclerosis was brought on by his injuries. He's one of more than 3,000 RUC and PSNI officers diagnosed as suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and they're claiming compensation, the biggest action of its kind in Northern Ireland legal history. They say the authorities let them down, failing to provide care and treatment which may have prevented broken lives.
We've invested so far approaching £1 million in this case, and the object is, 1, to get some result for the people that have suffered this, and 2, to prevent it happening in the future. The men and women of the RUC knew they were taking on risks, but the organisation knew about post-traumatic stress disorder and didn't put in place the mechanisms to deal with it.
I think that the more you read of, and the more I'm steeped in, I suppose, the situation that officers served in over the years, it is, I absolutely agree, it seems horrific that nobody thought that there might be an effect from that and did something about it.
Trauma smells, it tastes, it sounds, you see things, that's the basis for the intrusive thoughts.
Marion Gibson understands trauma better than most. Her experience includes the tragedies of Dunblane, Kegworth and Omagh.
When you think of some of the things people have been through, it's no wonder that they can't sleep, that they repeatedly see the scene that they have witnessed.
Even a single traumatic event can have long-term repercussions. Marion has also researched the effect of repeated exposure on frontline workers.
They were on chronic, heightened experience because they'd had serial traumatisation. They hadn't dealt with it, and I think that is what we now see as hopefully the peace comes. People may well have a reaction after the adrenaline and the alertness has dropped down.
Dorcas Crawford has a particular interest in a High Court case in London, a case against the Ministry of Defence by military personnel suffering post-traumatic stress disorder. There are similarities, but significant differences too.
One of the main differences is that whilst the army suffered terrible things and the soldiers were exposed to terrible things in the course of battle, they at least could go back to barracks afterwards. In the case of RUC or PSNI officers, they had to live with the threat day in, day out. And that's a very big difference in the two cases, because it means that obviously our argument is that there's a much stronger duty on the employer to look after employees, officers, because of the size of the threat at every level of their lives.
The case fails.
The court in this judgment accepts the reality and severity of the psychological injuries of war, but the result of the trial means that only a fraction of the soldiers, sailors and airmen we represent will be able to recover compensation.
Although the military case is rejected, Dorcas believes the judgment could actually help her action on behalf of RUC and PSNI officers, because it accepts that the Ministry of Defence did have a duty of care to its troops.
The judge found that the MOD fulfilled their duty of care, such as it was, and the judge felt that the system that they had in place was adequate. Now, the difference in our case is, and has always been, that there was absolutely no system whatsoever for a very long period of time, and therefore obviously that would be a very positive indication that the court feels there is a duty there for an employer.
Even in defeat, the legal team and their experts support her view.
Very disappointed, and I'm actually getting increasingly angry about it, really on behalf of the people that I've been looking after, that's all.
But clearly I'm sure it will assist Dorcas's cases, particularly in relation to the findings that he made on treatment and causation.
We really do not want to be here in 10 years' time arguing about the same things. We've got to learn something now, we've got to deal with it properly now. Otherwise we will be arguing about the same things in that period of time.
In the RUC or in the PSNI, it's the kiss of death to the career. Yeah. I mean, that's the end of it if you tell anybody that you've got a psychiatric condition.
The way we were always trained was don't think, react. If you think, you're dead. But whenever it's all over, how do you put that cork back in the bottle? How do you become a normal person where you don't go to these excesses of violence?
John spent most of his police career fighting terrorism, in Special Branch and the elite E4 undercover unit. In disguise, living and working amongst his enemies. He was trained by MI5 and the SAS.
They trained me how to kill and how to be violent. They never trained me how to be normal and how to contain it. And that's still in me. The worrying thing I have is I know I could still do that to some person. Now, hopefully I will never do it, but I know that side of me is still there. And it is very hard to contain it and to try and become normal again.
John thought each day would be his last. He says he was so close to gunmen and bombers that if they turned round, they could have kissed him. On one occasion, he pretended to be a local drunk to identify terrorists meeting in a house in Belfast.
I said to the bosses, I said, this is a suicide job, you're not going to get in here and get out. So I says, make sure they get my body, because I was convinced I wasn't going to live. I says, don't let them leave me in there where they can cut me up and stuff. I says, make sure you come in and get the body. And went up into an off licence, bought a dozen tins of beer, poured 6 over myself, and started drinking one of the other 6 and staggered down in and fell at their feet. And yelled and screamed and cursed at them. Sung the soldier song, generally messed about.
His ploy worked. He was beaten, kicked and thrown out, but he got the vital information.
Whenever I got back to base, as soon as I got in through the gate, I just started shaking, violently in control of my whole body. I just couldn't stop. And it was, I couldn't believe that I'd got out. I could not believe it. And one of the superintendents looked at me and says, take him out and get him vodka as quick as you can. And that was the only way I could stop shaking. Was I must have drunk a bottle and a half of vodka in the space of about an hour to stop the shakes.
Sam was a police cadet at 16, joining the regular force the day after his 18th birthday. In the next 3 years, he was to see 20 friends and colleagues murdered around him.
There was a constant sense that, you know, are you going to be next? And I suppose it's maybe only now that you realise how frightened you were at the time, but you would never have admitted it, you know. I don't think anybody ever, you know, but that fear was constant, you know. You were patrolling and working in an area where the pressure was always there.
Sam suppressed his torment. Later, dealing with a succession of suicides, he began to crack.
You know, the pain, the suffering in the family and whatever. I was sort of inheriting that pain and suffering as well, you know, and taking everything on board. As I say, as a run-of-the-mill busy police station, you're exposed to all that on a fairly regular basis, you know. And if it's nowhere to escape, it mounts up, mounts up, mounts up.
After yet another suicide, he could take no more.
I was called to deal with a hanging incident, and I recollect going to the hanging, and you know, the relatives being downstairs, being really, really distressed, and having to go and with colleagues and cut the gentleman down from where he had taken his life. And it's that point probably when you're trying to deal with that and the sort of grotesqueness of it all that I realised that I couldn't do it anymore, that it was a sort of straw that was breaking the camel's back, you know, that like it really is hands-on, you know. I was certain to look at this guy and having sort of unhealthy admiration for him, that whilst he had problems, he had done something to resolve them. And I could see that as being a legitimate way to deal with it, if nothing else worked. And it wouldn't have been the first time that, you know, those sort of thoughts had crossed my mind, but I realised that if I continued to expose myself to something like that, there was going to be possibly a time when I would use that as an option to deal with something.
I obviously have fairly close contact with a lot of my clients, and some of the cases are so tragic, and people who I've got to know quite well over the last few years, and to be honest, it's just heartbreaking to see how it affects them and their families on a daily basis. People who in the past have obviously been very efficient, competent, socially able people, who are now hardly able to string 2 words together on occasions, who can't enjoy normal relationships, who find themselves walking down the street and they hear a car backfire and they fall apart.
I've always loved to be on a farm. I grew up on a farm and loved to come to it any time I was off duty. When I felt I had to just get up and run away, I actually went back to my grassroots when I went to Australia, and mid-30s ended up milking cows by hand for less than £2 an hour.
When Heather cracked in 1990, she fled to the other side of the world, telling no one until the last minute.
and for some unknown reason it chose the 31st of December. The 6 o'clock flight out of Belfast to London, I had on my lap my white handbag, and in it I had my life. I'd burnt all my bridges, I had sold my house, sold my car, resigned from my job, and it was all in my handbag, what was left of it.
It was in Australia she realised her sanity was crumbling.
In the first couple of months there, things started to go terribly wrong, and noises would send me absolutely doolally. I was jumping at any wee noise at all. The thing that really I knew then there's something wrong, I was walking down the main street one day, and there's a car sitting with nobody in it. Now, I'd passed cars with nobody in it prior to that, but this car was sitting with nobody in it, and the sweat broke on me, and I looked at it and thought it just must have brought it back, a flashback from a time we'd been involved in many car bomb explosions at home. And I stopped the people coming behind me and said, don't go past that car, there's nobody in it. And they looked at me as if I was half mad, and they were quite right, I was probably totally mad at that stage. One of the worst things, there were many of them, but I do remember I was 19 at the time, and one of my jobs was to go and pick up bits and pieces that had been left in the street of a person who'd been blown up in a bomb. We weren't given gloves or anything, you just had to go and pick them up, put them into a bag and take them off to the morgue. Different things. I remember going to try and it was picking up spent bullet cases after a murder in a pub in Belfast, and going through the blood to pick up bits and pieces of evidence there. And you go home with all this in your head and you can't sleep, because it's only whenever you get in home and the lights are out and it all comes back to haunt you. I held the kidney dish for the pathologist, and I remember the bullets, him dropping the bullets into the kidney dish, and they have a sound all of their own. That was near the end, and I just remember thinking, I don't want ever to hear this again.
I've been with clients in situations where a helicopter has flown overhead and sweat literally has broken out in their brow. They have fallen apart, burst into tears. Strong, big, grown-up men who just can't cope with ordinary life, and that, personally, to deal with day in, day out, can be very difficult.
Like so many other police officers, David lost his first marriage. He nursed his second wife until her death 18 months ago, and now raises his 3 daughters alone.
The last few weeks have been bad for me. I had a good month there, start of August, end of July. Last few weeks, nightmare. Go to bed, exhausted, and you're just falling asleep. And maybe sleep 10 minutes, maybe sleep an hour, and suddenly bang, it's like being kicked in the head. And you wake up, really, I get this blue flash. I actually wrote a wee poem about it, right? Very short poem. The blue flash, this is when I got blown up with a police car. Weary bones, heavy lids, yielding mattress, take me down, yeah. Electric blue flash, crump. Shit, fuck, terror, awake. Swelling globes, throbbing heart. Lamp on, effing bastards. Gun on the pillow checked, worry search. Door locked, yep. Window closed, yep. Reach for Lee and Uris, new novel, glasses on. Shit, cat on the windowsill. No sleep tonight again. Listen. One ear cocked to the night creatures patter. Pitter patter. Sleep, sleep, denied. Drowsy lids, calm, yep. Lamp on, pillow deep. Fuck, blue flash. Excuse my language.
He was out there protecting the public, and they come along and kill 2 of my colleagues, and he was just lucky to survive.
Mark is no longer able to drive and relies on friends like Sam. 20 years ago, Mark survived a £1,000 landmine explosion which killed the 2 colleagues in his car. At first it appeared that he too was dead.
Initially it was assumed that Mark had died as well, and he had been placed in a body bag. Then became apparent that he was still alive.
Sam was stationed along with Mark in Bessbrook at the time. He says Mark never fully recovered, becoming a shadow of the man he once was.
Well, I feel guilty that I'm alive and my 2 colleagues are dead, which I shouldn't feel guilty for, but I do.
I think anybody certainly who has lost colleagues, you know, and has worked closely with them, feel that element of guilt.
This is the first time Mark has felt strong enough emotionally to visit the graves of the friends murdered beside him 20 years ago. He's also losing his sight, a legacy, he believes, of the bombing.
What's it say? Murdered by terrorists, or?
Killed in execution of duty, 18th of May 1984. He's 29 years. Very dear husband and father.
The people that did this atrocity are still walking about. People like myself who survived these terrorist incidents still paying the price. In 20 odd years, like, you know, and first time going to Paddy's grave, like, you know.
But that's something for you too, like, as I said.
Yeah, it's a step.
That's a step forward.
It's a
You know
step,
what
like,
it is now. As I said.
Mark asks Sam to drive to Bessbrook, where they were stationed, and past the bomb scene.
I was never a panicky person, but I would panic now as well, you know. I suppose that's to do with nerves, and it's just certain situations I come against. I can't really handle crowded areas because it's a panic. It took them about 14 years on to refer me to a psychiatrist, but the damage had already been done.
From America to Israel, the legal team has examined how other societies deal with post-traumatic stress disorder.
The past 3 years has been, even for people who are not involved in bombings, who are leading an ordinary everyday life, are suffering in some way a traumatic experience. Because you keep saying to yourself, how long can this go on? How many people are going to be killed? How many people are going to be burnt alive in buses? I mean, these are all innocent civilians who have been really slaughtered.
Stanley Shapiro moved his family to Israel 20 years ago. His children, born in Belfast, have all done national service in the Israeli Defence Forces. He's aware how differently Israel treats its soldiers and police officers who've suffered physically and psychologically.
I consider there is a fantastic backup and support system within Israeli society for people, for families who have lost loved ones, and for people who have been injured in the wars, people who have been injured in the terrorist attacks. I defy any country in the world who could provide these services at the same level. Whatever they need, it's there for them.
When you fuck your life with a shell shock, you know, with a post-trauma, yes, your heart is wounded, your mind is wounded, it's full of blood, and you don't see the blood, you're crying every day, and nobody see that you cry. This is the problem of the post-trauma. Because of that, I understand those soldiers and policemen in Irish, that they have the problem that they don't know how to express themselves, perhaps, because they bleeding. A lot of blood coming out of the body in the mind, and they don't know how to say it. This is the problem.
Shmerlik Calderon suffered alone for 20 years before getting help. In the past 4 years, his life has changed in ways unimaginable to PTSD victims in Northern Ireland.
We're driving now in a car that the government bought me. This is Seat Toledo, new one. And of course they support me every month that I can drive such a car. Not only with money, you know, they support us with spirit, you know, things. They support us, of course, doctor, whatever I need, psychology, therapy, you know, if I need a shiatsu or to make medicine. They sent me every year 5 days or 10 days of vacation with my wife. When I need a new computer, they support me and they buy me a new computer.
The Israeli Defense Forces have a legal responsibility to treat trauma and have been dealing with PTSD for 20 years. The trauma unit director has been on the front line.
I served as a soldier I fought in the Lebanese war. And then I went out of the army and went to learn, study, became a psychologist and came back to the army.
They've treated thousands with significant success.
We
not succeed always, but we have about 70% of success. It also depends about the immediate time that the person is asking for help. And we do also have success many years after the event occurred. In Israel, you can address our unit even if you went through the event 30 years ago.
This is Natal, the Israel Trauma Center for Victims of Terror and War. And we have a multi-purpose center here, starting with a national toll-free hotline.
But those who have been affected by these horrors continue to be tormented by their experiences.
Natal is a well-publicised independent trauma centre. Their hotline has taken 10,000 calls in the past 3 years, from a population a little bigger than Ireland's.
We have 25 volunteers who answer the phones from 10 in the morning to 10 in the evening.
People can get help, and people can change their situation, and it's not they don't have to stay in misery or suffering.
This is our therapeutic social club, where people who may be homebound because they're too afraid to go outside, because of afraid to be in a public place, in a shopping mall, on a bus. We try to create a safe place for them here with a variety of activities, including karate, tai chi, painting, cooking, to give them more skills, to give them more of a sense of empowerment of themselves, to break their social isolation, to be with other people, and to, in some ways, reclaim their lives.
Talk about this. Talk with them. Because we didn't talk. For 20 years, I didn't talk. It was wrong. I should talk about this. But my mind keep it, you know.
And many people will still, even after treatment, will suffer from PTSD, but the quality of life will be better. They will be able to live with the PTSD. Their life will be more richer.
Many friends of me say to me, listen, you have to ask from the government. They have to pay you. They have to recognize you as a post-traumatic from the war. And when I ask them, and they give it to me, my life completely changed. Completely changed. I said, first of all, I don't have a mother and a father anymore. You know, they died. Say, I have a father and a mother now. I have someone to take care of me. And it's good for me, you know. It's very good now. When I need something, I have everywhere to go. And they really support me. Whenever I ask them something, they support me. You know, I'm relaxed. Let's say if 10 years ago I said I want to live until 60, 65, and I say, hey, I can live until 75, 80. It could be nice. Why not to be an old man? And in the house, it's more relaxed with my wife, with my son, with my friends. A big change.
Okay, Sam, what I would like you to do now is thinking about that incident and bring up a picture that represents the worst part for you just now.
7 or 8 years ago, I attended a house fair.
One therapy helping victims is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR. Michael Pattison has worldwide regard as an expert practitioner.
Probably the gentleman's body being taken out of the house.
Okay. What you're seeing...
Michael is also a former RUC officer who experienced his own trauma.
There's an awareness of sudden pain, and I looked down and noticed that my arm missing from mid-upper arm. This left arm was chopped off too. And I looked down, I could see my left foot was turned in at right angles. And I knew at that point the femur was broken, though I wasn't aware of the damage that had been done to my leg at that point. I could also see a piece of shrapnel in my upper thigh here. And the strange thing was, the thought that crossed my mind then was, at least it's missed the family jewels. Whatever happens, happens.
Traumatic though the incident was, Michael didn't suffer PTSD. But the condition has become a large part of his life as a therapist because of his specialism in EMDR.
I'd read about it initially, and to me it sounded very quirky that by moving your fingers in front of somebody's eyes and then they get better and they get rid of a psychological trauma. So it sounded almost too good to be true. It's believed that what EMDR does is gives the brain a dual attention task to focus on at the same time. So the brain is trying to deal with this present day trauma as it thinks, but also it's got this fairly innocuous task that it has to work on at the same time. And through a process of what's called classical conditioning, then the brain learns that the incident is no longer in the present, that it's in the past. So if you think about the incident, link with that the words "I am in control" and just scan your body for any sensations that are there just now.
No, it's a far more relaxed state than it was at the age.
Many former police officers attend Michael's private practice. They hope compensation from a victory in their legal claim will pay for treatments like this.
Is it in any particular side, right or left?
No, just in the middle.
In the middle of the back. Have you any?
Heather too is now in private practice. Before returning from Australia, she trained as a complementary therapist, and many of her clients are policemen and women.
I now know what it's like to have job satisfaction. I now know what it's like to wake up in the morning and be happy to come into work. What we went through before was just so empty, and the last thing I would want to see is any other girl or boy going through what we went through without any help, because we did not have one bit of help.
John is now training to be a trauma counsellor, determined to turn even his most bitter experiences to the benefit of others.
My wife was in the police as well and was really finding it hard to cope. Another thing that put strain in the marriage was I couldn't come home and tell her what I was doing. She ended up, she was very bad, abusing drink violently, and went off with stress, was really starting to crack up, was starting to fray around the edges. She progressively got worse, and within a very short space of time my wife killed herself. She couldn't take it anymore, she broke. My two sons were 8 and 10. Nobody gave a shit. Nobody in the police cared. There was no light, it was all dark. And I just said then I'd kill myself.
John ended up in a padded cell.
I remember after about 10 weeks in hospital, I went out onto the balcony in the hospital, and it was about 6:30 in the morning, and I heard the birds. And the birds had been singing all along. I had never remember hearing birds sing. And I actually began to think then, it is good to be alive.
The case for compensation may take another year or more. The PSNI says it's inappropriate to comment on individual cases, but that it has long recognised post-traumatic stress disorder within the organisation, and for over 17 years, a dedicated occupational health unit has provided support for the entire police service. This includes, they say, those suffering from PTSD and complements the services provided by the NHS. But those seeking compensation say it was too little too late, and too many slipped through the net. For the past 3 years, treatment has been available through the Police Rehabilitation and Retraining Trust. It was set up to provide skills and training for officers leaving the service, but also has a unit offering psychological services. It has had some notable successes, one example being a former policeman who had suffered for many years.
The advent of him coming to PRT was that he engaged in treatment here, cognitive behavioural therapy, and in the course of 10 treatments over 14 hours spread over a period of time, 3 follow-ups over 12 months, made a 75% improvement on his original condition. Now, in psychological terms, that is very, very significant. That allows that person to manage the problems and difficulties that he has. They haven't been excluded entirely, but they are now manageable, and therefore I think it's fair to say he has got his life back.
To many ex-RUC officers, recognition of what they went through is even more important than compensation. A victory in the legal case would be a step towards that.
There are a huge number of them who say, it doesn't matter what anybody pays us now, we've got our pension and all the rest of it, we just want somebody to recognise what has happened to us. And that's a difficult thing as a lawyer, because all that I can do for them is try to get them money. That's the only thing that the court permits. And maybe it isn't the best vehicle for trying to get them some kind of recognition, but unfortunately it's the only vehicle.
All I'm asking the government to accept is we were asked to do too much with absolutely no safety net. Now, I don't want medals, I don't want money. I want them to say, we asked too much, we're sorry. There are people out there and they're dying on their feet. They walk about like zombies and nobody gives a shit. We're yesterday's heroes and nobody cares. And all I'm asking is, hey, somebody have the decency to try and put these people's lives back together again, because their families are in bits too. Yeah, I'm one of the better ones. It'd be funny if it wasn't so sad, wouldn't it?